I first heard of Jimson weed in the book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Later on I found out that the goats that my parents owned when I was a young child were believed to have been poisoned by Jimson weed due to the fact that before they died they were filmed by the local university walking around in circles, blind. The first time I came in contact with it was after viewing pictures of the plant on Arrowhead and soon after discovering many plants growing on a friend of mine's property. Day 1. I eat a total of 2 seed pods. My mouth is dry but I don't know it until I try to eat something. I feel tired so I lie down, but I can't sleep. I get back up because my friend Josh is sleepy so I let him have the bed. I walk outside to smoke a joint. I suddenly find myself nodding in agreement to whatever Josh was saying to me. He was sitting next to me. I turn my head away from him to take another drag of the joint and turn to pass it to him. But Josh is not there. He was never there. He has been in my bed sleeping. This takes a second to register. When it does, it seemed at the time no big deal that I just completely hallucinated a human being sitting next to me. Day 2. I boil 2 leaves and 2 flowers in 1 cup of water. Turns a yellow color, does not taste bad at first but toward the end of the cup it is hard to take in. About 20 minutes, I'm feeling kind of drunk. I sit down on the couch to watch TV to wait for it to kick in the rest of the way. It never does, or so I thought. I suddenly realized that I've been watching TV for over an hour. But I never watch TV really, so why was I watching it for so long? I walk outside to smoke a cigarette. When I return my little bother is sitting on the couch so I decide to have a chat with him. Mistake. I soon find myself talking about random bullshit that quickly switches to a completely different thing every sentence because I forgot whatever I was going to say before. This happened over and over again and began to frustrate me. I could not finish 2 sentences without totally forgetting anything I was just telling him about. No trace whatsoever. Just gone, lost in the depths of time and space. He notices this and starts getting annoyed, tells me I'm on LSD in a very threatened dark tone of voice. I feel like I should clear things up, make him not believe such a thing so I can retreat to my room for a little Floyd, and some doors, paranoia-free. Mistake. I'm suddenly talking about invading Gypsy, with slingshots. One of them shot me in the hand, the bitch, making a golf ball size hole that I can see through my palm. Boy did it hurt, I wanted to kill her I did. My brother wants to see the scars, grabs my hand, no scars, but I don't know why, went right through my hand I'm telling you, honest. I'm puzzled, where did the scars go? I then speak of climbing the radio tower. I really did this but it was weeks before. You can fall, if you fall you die. The tower wobbles, it sure does. The rest I cannot remember. My brother wants to know what the fuck I'm talking about. Day 3. I decide to introduce my friends to Datura. I boil a brew of about 7 leaves and 5 flowers. I'm the only one that drinks it for the most part. They didn't like the taste so they only drank half a cup. I drank 3. Same stuff, dry mouth, drunk feeling. I get tired so I lie down. I suddenly awake, my body is like iron, it is an effort to even move. I feel incredibly disoriented. I walk outside to get some air, passing my friend who says something to me. I reply but it's such an effort to move my jaw to talk that my words come out garbled and deep-voiced. When I'm outside, my perception of distance is so fucked up I fall down in front of the porch stairs, catching myself on the top stair every time I try to climb them. I proceed to walk in and outside over and over, I can't make up my mind. When I finally get back inside it's time to sleep. I walk into his little brother's room but there is no bed in the corner. Where is the bed? I search around. The entire room is in plain sight but I search nonetheless, no bed. I search the rest of his house thinking maybe they moved the bed. I'm frustrated now. Where the fuck did the bed go? No such luck. So I sleep in his closet. I awake the next day to realize there was never any bed in the corner. There is at my house, but not his. Things in common on each experience were that I could never piss. I don't know if I never had to but thought I did or that I did but could not. Also, I got tired. But I never slept. It was almost like dying. I seemed to lie down to let my current world and body die only to get up after in a new, dark world. A world of a constant state of discomfort and dark perception. Each time, I hallucinated, but the hallucinations were true, and not just walls breathing or colors changing hue, but actually seeing and speaking with things that were not even there. No noise, just silence. Datura is a very strange drug. I believe every drug user or herbalist to try it at least once. My next experience, I will use Datura in my religious practices and do a series of meditational techniques. Dosage. Night 1, D0. 20 seeds. D plus 20 minutes. 20 seeds. D plus 1 hour. 20 seeds. Night 2, the next night. D plus 20 hours. 80 seeds. The first night, there really wasn't a come up. It was so gradual that I didn't even really notice that I was tripping until I started seeing shadowy figures flying around my peripherals. I also began to have the recognizable poison feeling. This was probably less than an hour after taking the first 20 seeds. Second night, the come up was more intense than the night before was at its peak. I began to feel like things were talking to me, but I couldn't figure out what they were. More shadowy figures flying around. Also feeling quite poisoned, but that didn't make me uncomfortable for some reason. I just knew it was there, but I didn't care. On the first night, the shadowy figures and a poor perception of time were pretty much all I noticed. I also had slightly blurred vision and had difficulty reading my cell phone. I had the urge to walk throughout the night, but never had a destination in mind. The second night was much more intense. I began to see people that I haven't seen in years standing right next to me. I really thought they were with me, and I held normal conversations with them. They were actually conversations I would have with the person that I saw. However, in the middle of conversation, I would look up and they would be gone. This sounds more disturbing than it actually was to me at the time. My mind was in such an awkward place that I was willing to accept the fact that people just disappear sometimes. I also spent the entire night eating food out of my empty hands, smoking cigarettes that weren't really there, and smoking invisible pipes full of invisible weed. Of course, I also kept talking to these people. The weird thing about the conversations is that they blurred together, as if they were the stitched together memories of a dream you can't quite remember. The wanderlust was unquenchable. I had 7 or 8 people with me trip-sitting, and they all had to keep me from falling over and walking places I shouldn't. They also had a hell of a time trying to get me to go to bed. I just kept trying to walk out of the room for no reason. I continued to have the poisoned feeling for about a day after the trips. The most annoying side effect was that I couldn't read for a few days. I couldn't focus on text right in front of my eyes. It was infuriating. Experiencing a true delirium like Datura is definitely not to be taken lightly. I had 7 trip sitters and I still managed to almost break my roommate's TV, skin my knees, and stop walking in the middle of the crosswalk to admire the ground. I fell down. A lot. I woke up with my shoes in the sink. When I asked everyone what they were doing in my sink, they said I was trying to smoke them like a pipe, but I gave up and put them in the sink. This stuff is seriously messed up. Not for everyone. Please read extensively before you plan a detour trip. I walked away from this with a great sense of accomplishment. It was physically and mentally draining, and I did it. I talked to people in my head and experienced what I would not hesitate to call a waking dream. It was absurd and whimsical, and I'm glad that I did it. I think if I ever try it again, it will be out in the woods, camping, with a single trip sitter, and I'll make tea instead of just chewing up the seeds and eating them. This trip was not a good one, as I might have caused myself some permanent damage to my body. Do not try this, as I was stupid enough to try. In terms of drugs, it's like heroin compared to weed. It's deadly. I am only writing this experience not to encourage but to hopefully stop someone from trying it. This is about 2% of my trip that I remember. Time taken, 1:30 p.m. Amount taken, 10 seed brew. Weight of person, 130 pounds. 1:30 p.m. I was looking into drugs on Aeroid and found Datura and immediately knew that I had one of those plants in my backyard. So I call my friend over, who is 6 feet 3 inches, plays football, so he's super strong, as I do not work out, so he could easily overpower me just in case shit got sketchy, which it did. I took 10 seeds from the plant and brewed it with 2 cups of water and drank it. D plus 35 minutes. I feel it coming up like shrooms somewhat. After about 10 minutes I stop feeling the high and just trip. I look around the room and I saw my friend using his cell phone. He drops it and I pick it up for him and hand it back. According to him, about every 10 minutes for the next 2 hours I would be picking up his invisible phone and hand it to him. He just said thanks every time to avoid a bad trip. D plus 1 hour. I'm completely tripping. I hardly remember it, but I know I was in my hallway talking to my desk thinking it was my ex-girlfriend. I started to cry and yell in the desk and I punched the mirror from becoming so mad. I walked away from the desk after about 2 minutes. To me, my friend recorded the whole trip to show me today, as I tripped less than 24 hours ago. He was telling me that I stood in the hallway laughing for a couple hours, looking as the desk, having conversation in a form of zombie Latin, spoken Latin. He showed me a small part of the video. It was horrible. I was literally saying nonsense with a word in Latin I could understand, which was grandpa. Then I don't remember what happened after, but nothing bad for been told. D plus 4 hours. I remember getting out of my house and my friend immediately tries to put me back inside, or at least in the backyard. I panic and try to punch the devil in the face as I had actually hit my friend. I ran so fast into the street and barely missed a car. I remember feeling that was a spaceship and I had missed my only ride out of this planet. Instantly my friend detained me, and though I was in trouble so my vision got red, the grass was even trying to help me by sticking the blades out to attempt to cut my friend's leg off and free me. We got inside and I noticed the smell of something burning. I stumbled to the kitchen and my friend said I went to my pantry and kept throwing food out. I don't remember after. D plus 6 hours. I was inside in my room with my friend listening to Svanglin in the video. I stared at my hand endlessly, which my friend told me I had did for about 2 hours. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw my Japanese fan and a little girl and came in and walked out in front of it and walked away. This beautiful girl I hadn't recognized was a mystery, so I followed her to my brother's room. My friend said that I kept mumbling my girlfriend is here, which I assume is my ex because I'm currently not dating. I busted up into tears in my brother's room asking myself why did my relationships burn. After all that I remember was my head hitting something soft, and I woke up this morning with slight visuals. After effects. When I got out of bed I went downstairs to get some cereal and I got the milk out and started to pour a little bit and I saw a huge stream of milk as if I had turned it completely upside down. This is my story of my experience with tree datura. Please note that I'm writing this while experiencing all the effects of it. It started 2 days ago. My hunger for a hallucinogen/delirium was crazy like always. It turns out, my friend has a Brug's mania plant. We boil 1 flower and split the drink. I was high, drunk, feeling warm, heavy. It wasn't enough. The second day, I got talked into drinking a tea composed of 2 leaves, 2 flowers. The effects start after about a half hour. I go off into my own la-la land, my friend and I are gone. Us both being decently experienced with hallucinogens prepare for the worst. We venture off into the trip, doing what we always do, mess with each other and have a good time. Try to get the vibes going good. Fast forward a few hours, the affect grows a lot more potently. We go on a nice long walk around town, killing time, enjoying the body high. No hallucinations, no delirium. We got some nice tracers though. Watching cars go by in the headlights. Morph into some fantastically awesome trails. We get really exhausted from it, and decide to pass out. I go to sleep. After half hour of trying, I get some vivid and lifelike dreams. I wake up, still flying high. I'm enjoying it. The high won't go away, all day. I start to get nervous, as my vision is so bad I couldn't read anything, and all I could do was space out. It's still pretty bad. I'm having a difficult time reading this story as I write it. The effects are weighing me down so much that I just want to cry and stop dripping. It's not that datura is intense. It just lasts a long time, and it gets very tiring the longer the trip lasts. I haven't eaten anything within 24 hours because of it. Most reports I've read stated states of delirium. I had no such thing. My heart feels stressed. I'm getting depressed. My veins are constricted. Now, don't even bother to say, your fault for dancing with a poison. It did one nice thing for me. It quenched my urge to trip anymore for a long time. At least with something I know won't last for days. My stomach is in pretty bad pain as well. If this isn't enough, my other friend, who dosed today, is in the hospital from that shit. I probably should go. But I'm assuming the effects will be gone in a few hours. But, this is my trip report. Long story short, no hallucinations, killer trails, heart pains, constricted veins, stomach pains. Feels like my brain's fried. Do this at your own risk. Be careful with the dosage. Take precaution with using this plant. The many-day high will get to you. I have no urge to do anything but to lay down wherever I go and close my eyes because I feel so tripped out. Thanks for reading. Peace. I am an advocate for harm reduction. I believe that drugs are a wonderful thing, however one must understand that not all substances are suitable for human consumption, and can be very dangerous to one's health. Datura is a very dangerous and unpredictable substance, with doses being impossible to determine. Many cases of hospitalization and even death have been recorded. I do not condone, approve of or suggest taking Datura. I took a gigantic leap of faith, and I am lucky, to say the least, to have made it out all right. Hello, humble people of shroomery. A friend of mine, let's call him Jay, has an Inoxia plant growing in his garden. Him, being unacquainted to delirious and natural drugs for the most part, never took much notice to the plant, however I most certainly did. I started doing research on how to determine dosage, but it was useless, it's impossible to determine. So, I decided not to tempt fate too much, and after extensive argument with Jay, I decided to make a soup with 2 0.5 gram leaves, 2 seeds and 1 flower. The taste was okay, just a normal vegetable soup. The flower had a very pleasant smell, can't tell you what smell it reminds me of. Jay was trip-sitting me for the Datura trip. I was writing down my experiences. D+0. I eat the soup, pop a vitamin C tablet and sit down in my usual tripping spot, a spot on the floor where I've had my first mushroom trip. Jay is sitting on my bed, listening to music on my speakers. The TV is on, with no sound on, playing some cartoons from Cartoon Network. D+30 minutes. Nothing seems to have changed too much. So far there are no changes to the auditory, only a very subtle change in my visionary experience. My mind is in a calm state, same as before. Much different to what I'm used to, excluding nutmeg, with a very distinct lack of a buildup. There's no nausea, no uneasiness of any kind. No pupil dilation to be seen. Everything, so far, feels and sounds the same as before. Writing isn't difficult. D+1 hour. Visual effects similar to that of a light THC high. Hardly noticeable, it keeps fading in and out. Me and Jay are talking the entire time, no difficulty in speech, still in a calm state of mind, barely anything has changed. Pupil dilation is still not present. Writing isn't difficult. Stays the same for the next 2 hours. D+3 hours. I get up to go grab a drink of water from my kitchen, which is just down the hall. I appear to walk for a very long time before I end up getting there. Walking doesn't feel more difficult than it usually is, it just seems as if the room is stretching outwards from me. I find this quite amusing and start laughing quite a bit. I eventually reach my kitchen, grab myself a glass of water, and trek on back towards my room. The water is colder than usual. I can't completely explain this one, it just seemed as if my water dispenser cooled the water much colder than it usually is. Visual effects still the same as before, maybe a bit more obvious. The vision change is fading in and out at a slower pace. So far, a pleasant experience. Pupil dilation a bit more obvious at this point. I've still got my head about me, and talking isn't any more difficult than before. My handwriting is slightly off, it feels like I have little control over my pencil, though it's still legible. D+4 hours. I black out for maybe 10 seconds, according to Jay. I see Jay sitting next to me, and get confused as to why he's there. I asked him that. He tells me I'm sitting you on Datura mate. I get more confused, I have no recollection of taking Datura at all. I'm having trouble remembering anything prior to the short blackout. I read into my journal I'm taking, and I see that I've taken Datura. I start comprehending my situation, and relax again. Visual effects similar to that of a light LSD dose. Mentally, I am calm, although I have some nonsensical thoughts, and some existential ones. For example, I am contemplating what I'm currently doing with my life, and what I do for the people around me, my physical health, and the list goes on. Pupil dilation very apparent at this point. Writing gets slurred, resembling my drunken handwriting. There's a fair bit of nonsense on that page, random words thrown about. Jay tells me when I sobered up that I had a fine, lengthy conversation with him, however I have no recollection of even moving my mouth. To Jay, everything seems as it was before. I'm still holding a completely normal conversation with him. The conversation stretches over a few hours. I hardly move a muscle during the entire conversation. Racing thoughts continue throughout. I am not afraid, however. Still in a very calm, collected state. D+9 hours. Visual effects in full swing. Imagine a high psilocybin trip. Jay gets tired, he tells me to wake him up if I need anything. He goes to sleep. Thoughts are coming in and out of my head at light speed. I try to stand up, but find that I'm unable to move a single muscle. I've had similar experiences on high-dose LSD trips. Jay tells me that I started talking to him, but he continued sleeping because it was trip nonsense. I don't have a recollection of even moving my mouth. Breathing is no issue, I can move my head normally. Arms and legs feel frozen in place, though I am still writing. It feels as if I am not controlling my arm at all, while it's moving. Suddenly, all altered experiences stop. My vision, hearing, everything returns back to normal. It feels like I just woke up from a dream. Arms and legs move as they should. I can control my mouth now. It's as if I've sobered up 100%. Then, just as suddenly, an out-of-body experience. I see myself sitting there on my floor, and the camera panning across the room, entering my hallway, and going into my garden. And, again, just as suddenly, I snap out of it and I find myself actually standing in the garden. I have zero recollection of ever standing up, yet alone walking out of my house. The gates are locked, however, and Jay has hidden the key, so I had zero chance of exiting my garden. The trip seems to be a sort of dreamlike thing. I'm unsure of which parts are real, and which parts are my trip. I've read reports where users have actually been sleeping the entire time, as reported by their sitters. It's a very interesting experience. I actually started playing with it a bit, where I'd imagine a scenario and had it occur to me. I imagined my favorite dreams, and had them happen in front of my eyes. Then, again, my trip ended. However, visual effects were still in full swing. Racing thoughts consistent. I'm back in my room now. Outside of a written entry in my journal, I have no recollection of my visit to the garden. Datura seems to make you lose short-term memory. The experiences keep looping, with the dreamlike sequences, normal trip sequences, and apparent sobriety for the majority of the trip. D+ 17 hours. I was stuck in the loop for many hours, according to my journal I wrote down. It was a never-ending loop. Visual experience hasn't changed in the slightest. During my tripping moments I am unable to move my body, and I have no idea whether or not I'm talking or not. The dream sequences were usually out-of-body experiences that led to me traveling somewhere. I am experiencing none of the usually reported bad experiences, like dementia. Though, heavy ego trip was occurring, and I can see why someone would consider ego a death that's significant to be a negative experience. Suddenly, at the 17-hour mark, my trip stops for several hours. I am starting to recollect everything that happened. Pupil dilation, according to Jay, is still present however. My mouth feels like cotton, and I suddenly realize I haven't had a drink in about 16 hours. I attempt to walk into my kitchen, when I fall through the floor at around the 19-hour mark. After this point, most of the trip is a blur, and I haven't written anything down. An intense drug, I can see why it would be a negative experience for some people. I personally had a revelation of sorts, and I believe I have changed in some way, though I am still in the heavily contemplative phases. I think the Datura gave me a heavy fever afterwards, 39.9 being the highest recorded temperature. I also vomited and felt ill, however my condition is improving. I think Datura isn't a drug anyone should take. While my trip was fine, there are countless instances of trips going awry, with people getting hospitalized, and worse. In fact, delirious in general should be a class of drugs that go untouched, as they are very heavy and intense on your psyche. I had a very fun trip, one of the funnest I've ever had. Might be pure luck, or something, but there it is. I don't plan on doing Datura again, because I consider myself lucky. For all I know, my next Datura trip might be a hospitalization for me, as is often the case. At this current point in time, I'm unsure of whether or not I'm actually still tripping or not. I might be in a coma right now, living my life through. But hey, reality seems real currently, so whatever. Trip safe, trip responsibly. Hi, I'm an entrepreneur in the field of psychedelia. Dosing large amounts of Datura on several bizarre occasions indeed I did. This one time after a joyful trot into the wilderness I did in fact stumble upon some Datura. I decided to dose quite a large handful of seeds after I set up camp for the night. I had my campfire on the sandy beach next to a river which was far enough away from any trees so I could see the night sky clearly. The effects came on slowly as I sat next to and poked the fire. I have nearly none or very little memory of what happened next other than waking up in the freezing night which was -2 degrees, to a nearly extinguished fire. I crawled over to it and gave it a blow to see if there were any embers still. I saw a little ember and decided to pick some dry grass up nearby to get it going again. I didn't need to fetch any since I'd already done that while I was preparing the campsite, but foolish I was and I seemed to have forgotten about it. I was fully dressed from head to toe in warm gear, but I stripped down to my underwear after seeing what I thought was someone in the river drowning. After I jumped in I realized how dumbass that it was to jump in and there was nobody in the river at all. So now I was nearly naked in -2 degrees and without a fire to keep me warm, and I was saturated. I asked the guy just near me to hand me his lighter so I could start the fire again. But he didn't. The only thing that kept me warm was how furiously I was shivering. I interacted with a few people I thought were there but weren't as I froze my freaking ass off high as fuck on Datura in the coldest months of the year, and I recon it would have been horrible if it weren't for the way my selective memory has blocked me from remembering. But luck was on the way. Because the next morning after sunrise all life sprung back to me and it was very warm and pleasant even for a winter morning. I began a quick search for my clothing to very little avail and contemplated navigating my way back through the paddocks and bush I had traveled to get there. I kept thinking it found my stuff, but as I picked at you it would turn to stone. One time I found what I thought was my bag and put my fingers into some fresh cow shit. Nice one, I thought to myself, I found some cow shit. One of the worst and most uncomfortable trips I think anyone has ever experienced. Really. Anyway, I decided a couple of weeks later to go and fetch my stuff while I'm sober. And after fetching all of it except my socks, I decided to trip again on Datura. Great idea, I thought. Why not dose another handful of seeds and see what happens? But this time I walked back to my residence. And this time, being within reach of basic amenities and the homely comforts of a house, I began to experience the good side of Datura tripping. Which are the abundant microscopic life that seems to coat everything, including myself. As I peered into a glass of water, I could see the most minute little organisms moving around like sperm do when you look at them under a microscope. I saw transforming insects that were penetrating the surface of my skin and seemingly entering my body, then I could feel them moving beneath my skin. I could see areas where they were seemingly nesting, then I would reach out to them and, like a nest of ants do when something disturbs their nest, they began to crawl up my arm and in through my skin they would burrow. I know that a deliriant is the most common and best category to class Datura, but when it comes to these microscopic little fellas I think the case is very different. They are the only thing that a Datura trip in my experience consistently produces time after time. The ability to see with the naked eye microscopic life forms. I've not yet had a Datura trip where I have not met with crazy insect-like creatures. I've seen a lot of crazy shit on the deliriant side of things, like people and objects turning to stone and trees with legs and arms and faces and a lot of weird shit. But for me it's the insects mostly that keeps me fascinated by Datura. And I can't forget the crazy hallucinations of outer space entities flying amazingly advanced spaceships that can happen while looking into a clear sky at night. Anywho, thanks for reading my poorly pieced together report on the subject. First time. Dose. 1 flower of Datura Inoxia, oral, eaten, not tea. It started slow and first I started to lose balance, everything that was close started to become blurry, couldn't read texts on my phone, couldn't see the time, then I kept forgetting where I was and what I was doing, also bad cottonmouth. Like 10 times worst any weed cottonmouth ever. Got onto a wrong bus, gave the driver all my money and told him where to drive like I was in a taxi. Friend took my money from the driver and dragged me out of the bus. I was smoking one cigarette after another, but I didn't remember lighting any of them. I got a little bit pissed because I didn't have hallucinations, that is, until I saw that my pack of cigarettes was full. Later found out that was a very common trip, but other than that no hallucinations, and since that was the only point of doing Datura I decided to chill out for a month and then take a higher dose. Second time. Dose. Half of a seed pod of Datura Inoxia, oral. I decided to take the dose at 4 AM. Go to sleep and set my alarm clock for 9 AM so I sleep through the bad part of the trip that starts 2 hours after ingestion and lasts about 3 hours. So I woke up feeling normal, eyesight surprisingly not as bad as the first time, like I was completely sober. Then I see some girl sleeping in my bed, I start waking her up and puff she vanishes and I find myself holding a blanket. I freak the fuck out and go ask the clock, not a person, a clock. On my wall, WTF was that, and then I realized I was talking to an inanimate object. Freaked the fuck out again. Forgot what I was freaking out about and turned on the TV. While I was watching TV I look at the wall on my left. Biga jumps out of the wall, starts running and vanishes into another wall. I jump from my chair and then I look at the clock. It says 3 PM. I start freaking out because I was late for school. I get my backpack, lock the door and see my friend. We chat, everything is normal. He says, dude, where are you going? It's Sunday, there's no school today. I start laughing and start going back to my house when I remember that friend I saw lives about 10 km from my house and his leg is broken. I turn around and he vanishes. I get back to my house, my mom and dad are home. No tripping. I talk to them, ask how the vacation was, you know, small talk. Then I go to my room to get my cigarettes, get back to the living room and they're not there. I call my mom to see where they are, and they say they are still on vacation. I freak the fuck out again. Look at the clock and it's 11:30 a.m. I remember it was 3 p.m. when I left home, so I figure it's worthless looking at the time if I don't know if I'm hallucinating or the time is right. Then I talk to a glass of water for about an hour. I didn't use words, I could talk to it with my thoughts. Can't remember the conversation except how the glass was complaining about how much its life sucked. After that I freak out because I was, once again, talking to an inanimate object. I get paranoid that I might do something stupid, so I lock myself in the house and throw the key through the window and go to sleep. Woke up at about 6 p.m. The trip was long gone. At least I thought so. I went out and chilled with friends, and then I see a couple walking towards us. Nothing weird about them. Regular people like the friends I was chilling with. And then I blink and they disappear, and that was the last trip. I was normal the rest of the night. My comments. This is not a drug, it is more like Alzheimer's plus schizophrenia. You have moments when you have no idea what is real, where you are, who you are or what you are doing. But there are moments of clarity, as I like to call them, when you are lucid, just like people with Alzheimer's, and they don't last long. You have about half a minute between two schizophrenic episodes. I think this is a attention whore drug, because you will not have a good time, but it will make a pretty damn good story. That is if you survive it. When I decided to take this drug, I was in a state where I'd do anything to get high. Although the experience itself wasn't too bad, after doing research on how dangerous this drug is, I don't ever want to do it again. My mom also looked after someone in intensive care who developed a psychosis after using Datura. It started at my mate's house. I made up a tea solution with 1.5 flowers and let it sit overnight. When I woke up, I downed the tea on an empty stomach. The first effects I noticed was a dry throat and mouth. So dry I couldn't even swallow saliva or drink water. It felt disgusting. I started to feel nauseous and ended up throwing my guts up. Once I'd thrown up, I felt better, but strange. I decided to have a lie down, and as soon as I closed my eyes I experienced some strange verses. They weren't seen with my eyes, but vividly in my mind, like if someone was to visualize an object. The difference was I had no control over what I visualized, so it was like I watched a movie played out in my head. I saw some striking things with lots of detail and color. As I was lying on the bed, one of my mates started talking to me. I replied and we had a short conversation till I opened my eyes and noticed he was at the other end of the room. Everyone was staring at me cause I'd been talking to myself. I shouted, "How did you get over there so fast? Wasn't I just talking to you here?" And he said no, as they all laughed. I found it quite amusing and started laughing too. This continued to happen as I closed my eyes again. It was like I'd fall into conversing with him, without realizing it. I do it unconsciously, forgetting it was fake and it happened previously. As soon as I opened my eyes and realized no one was there, I'd realize I was talking to myself again. Very strange. I felt much better now. The dryness of throat and mouth had disappeared and I no longer suffered from any nausea, so I decided to walk down into town with some mates. I don't remember much until we got into town and decided to catch a bus home. We jumped on the bus, got our tickets and sat down. I thought 2 other mates were sitting up the back, as I was down the front, so shouted out to them as they shouted back. I later found out my friends were not on the bus and I was just embarrassing myself. The bus drove on its route until it reached my street. The driver drove right past my street and I shouted, "No, turn right. You missed my house," expecting the driver to deliver me to my house. I realized I had to get off at a stop and wondered why I'd shouted at her. I got off at the next closest stop and began my walk home. I have no idea why I decided to go home whilst on Datura. Dumb idea. On my walk I was alone, but I kept having conversations with my friends in the same way I had the conversations on the bed. I'd be walking, and I'd hear someone talk to me and reply to them, then as I turned to look towards the voice, I'd see them for a split second until they vanished into thin air. I believed I was with around 4 or 5 people when I was alone the whole walk. I decided that all my friends had invisibility cloaks and they were playing tricks on me. Every time I looked at them as they disappeared, I got really mad cause they wouldn't stay visible and shouted and cursed at them. At one point I was trying to pull trees out of the ground, believing they were hiding underground. I also searched through people's gardens looking for where my friends had gone. I passed quite a few people while undertaking these strange acts, and got very strange looks from people. I ignored them thinking my actions were perfectly normal. On the walk home, I continuously found a cigarette in my hand alight. and I'd put it in my mouth and take a drag but not feel any smoke in my lungs. I'd look at my hand and notice the cigarette had disappeared. I also felt and heard my phone vibrate and ring in my pocket. I'd pull it out, answer it, and start talking to someone on the phone when I noticed it went silent. Look at my hand and realize the phone was gone. This kept happening quite a few times, and no matter how many times it happened, I was unable to realize it was a hallucination until after it had disappeared. Once I reached home, my mother opened the door. I introduced my friends, asking if they could come in for a bit. I went into the kitchen and told my invisible friends to make themselves at home if they were hungry or thirsty, all while my mum watched in disbelief. I remember my mum asking where my friends had gone, and I looked around noticing they had disappeared. I told her they were probably under their invisibility cloaks or hiding in the bushes outside. She sat me down and asked what drugs I had taken. Not realizing how fucked I was, I lied and said none. She ended up telling me she'd called an ambulance, thinking I had gone insane, which caused me to run away as fast as I could from her house. I ended up walking back into town and was talking to my invisible friends as I walked through the main street. I decided to start walking back to my friend's house, thinking I was with 2 other people the entire time, and I was furious as they kept disappearing on me. I reached my friend's house, and by then the drug had worn off. I kept asking my friends if they had been with me at all today, and they said no, they'd been at home. Confused, I realized I had been delusional on Datura all day, and told my friends as they laughed at my strange conclusions and experiences. Datura was very strange, and very confusing. Whilst on the drug, you don't know what's real and what's not, and it puts you in a dreamlike state, where you can accept very delusional beliefs. Although the experience wasn't frightening, it was very confusing and frustrating, and I don't plan on doing it again. Alright, this is my first trip report ever, so I am going to tell you about my weirdest and probably dumbest trip ever. And by dumb I mean I was younger and way stupid, and did this without doing any research into what the fuck Datura even was. Now I am a bit smarter, and will never in hell eat this stuff again. It really is called the devil's weed for a reason. A brief background on myself: I have always been fascinated with nature and natural psychoactives, and at the time of this trip, I was in grade 10, smoked weed every day, often 3 to 4 times a day, and was about 5'8", weighing about 120 pounds. Pretty average for my school. At this point in my life, I had no experience with hallucinogens, only weed. My high school has always been very well known around my area for cannabis. I live outside Toronto, in a small town, and my school has a reputation for having a lot of weed. Ask a stoner you know in Toronto, and the town they think of first is probably my town, Grin. Anyways, I started hearing things at my school about this plant growing in people's gardens, and if you mixed its dried leaves into joints you got way higher. Next I heard people were eating its seeds and actually hallucinating, so of course, I had to try this shit out. I talked my friend, we'll call him C, into giving me a location of one plant, and at lunch me and 3 friends, B, D, and T, snuck over and filled out bags with the spiky Datura seed pods. Before I went home to try them, I asked B how much I should take, trusting his drug experience, and he suggested 30 to 50 seeds to start, and work my way up from there. Probably good advice. That night, I ate them. Bear in mind I was a big pothead, and maybe a little naturally stupid, and had no clue that you had to wait longer for orally ingested drugs to kick in. 10 p.m., I started with 50 seeds, chewed them up good, and swallowed them. Waited 15 minutes, I know, dumb, and figured they weren't working. 10:15 p.m., ate another 50 seeds, chewed, swallowed. 10:45 p.m., still no effects. I know, he'll eat another 50 seeds. 11 p.m., alright, now I have 150 seeds in me. 1 hour since I ate the first 50 seeds and still effects yet, so I figure this stuff must be crap. Stupid liars at my school must be just trying to get attention. So I smoke some weed and go to sleep. I figure I wasted my time. Halfway through the night, I wake up and my hand is on my face. For some reason the first thing to come to mind is it is a scorpion. I don't move, I don't want to get stung. Then I swat it off my face and realize it's my hand. This whole thing doesn't even strike me as unusual, and I go back to sleep. 7:30 a.m., Tuesday morning, I wake up for school, but something is definitely not right here. My room is kind of moving in a way it didn't before, and my coordination is wrong. I stumble over to my door and to the laundry room to get dressed, when I think I see my dad standing there watching me. I've never quite got along with really that well, as he does not like my affinity for psychedelics. He just stands there staring, and I ask him, "What is wrong with you?" "I'm trying to get dressed here." "Wait, what the hell, where did he go?" I go downstairs and start eating breakfast, and find out my dad left for work 2 hours earlier. I am confused. Suddenly it dawns on me. Maybe this Datura stuff isn't bullshit after all. I then went to school and really started my nightmarish trip. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad in the right environment, but high school was definitely not the time or place for this particular trip. I talked to my friend C, who decides he should tell me how long it lasts. "Yeah dude. This stuff lasts 3 days, at least." "WTF, man?" He tells me to have a good ride, good luck, then leaves for class. Fuck, now I'm worried. The rest is fragments of memory. But I will share the ones I remember here as I remember them. Day 1. Things went reasonably well. Nobody seemed too suspicious, other than D and other friends tell me my pupils are massive. I remember hearing the odd voice in my head, paranoia, crazy shit like that, and wicked bad cottonmouth. Day 1 went relatively well, not too many big hallucinations that I remember, mostly tracer type things I think. At this point none of my stoner friends, B, D, and T, had eaten any seeds. Things are trippy, but not really in a bad way, and not like any drug I've done since then. Day 2. The shit hits the fan. Constant cottonmouth, voices in my head, objects that shouldn't move sometimes seem to be. But not in a cool way anymore. My girlfriend read up on Datura and was worried about me, and I'm trying hard to maintain during classes, which is getting tough. I never noticed how much my science teacher looks like an orangutan, and I almost laugh in her face. Then I remember talking to my history teacher and my foot melts into the floor for a second. She must have noticed because she asked if I'm feeling okay and looked at my eyes suspiciously. My eyes are like huge black holes at this point. I am constantly thirsty, dizzy, and have a headache. My friends all want to eat some despite my warnings, but who gives a shit right now? I am focused on appearing sober, and doing a shitty job at it. That night I go home and sit on the couch and just stare for a while. Not at the TV, I don't think it even occurred to me. Just into space. I remember feeling like my brain was full of static. Then my mom comes home and asks if I am okay, and for some reason I comment on how foggy it is outside. She tells me there is no fog, it is sunny. I decide this is a good time to take a walk down to where I work down the street to ask my boss for some time off the next week for a camping trip. Here comes the craziest hallucination I think I have ever had. Since this I have tripped on mushrooms once, MDMA 3 times, mescaline 5, LSA 15 plus times, and salvia dozens of times, as well as a pretty large bunch of other things I won't get into now. I still think this one was my weirdest hallucinations to date, excluding salvia. Nothing gets weirder than that plant. I was walking down my street. I walked past a mini mall, looked to the left at my reflection in a dark window, and thought I saw me walking holding hand with my girlfriend. The weird part was I was so screwed up at this point it didn't even click in that she wasn't there. Then I looked back a second later and now I was holding hands with myself. This clicked in as not right and scared the fucking piss out of me, and I looked to my right and sure enough, I was alone. I am not exaggerating, this was the realest hallucination I've experienced. I can't remember if I kept walking or went home. Day 3. Things are getting nightmarish, and I am really looking forward to the end of this bullshit. Voices coming and going more frequently as well as trails on objects, and I am starting to get pretty anxious and paranoid. I remember having a lot of trouble communicating with people, and even at one point, seriously considering that Datura had made it possible for me to read people's minds. By now I was getting pretty delirious. I am not sure if it was a hallucination or not, but there was one moment in day 3 where I was seriously convinced I might die. I was sitting in history writing a test, failed it, obviously, when suddenly I felt massive pain in my chest. The pain was real, but my brain may have made it seem worse at the time. The pain spread quickly to my left arm and back and I was sure I was having a heart attack. I was freaked the fuck out and started sweating. Luckily, I sat in the back of the class and somehow got through this without anyone noticing. I remember starting to get up to try and get help, but the pain was so much I had to stay sitting and squeezed my eyes shut. Then a couple minutes later it was gone, as quickly as it came. Then, later that same class we had a surprise fire alarm, where I met my friend D outside, who was also now on Datura. He had no clue what was happening, and thought it was time to go home. I tried to tell him we still had school but he thought I was lying. There was some more shit, but this trip report is long enough already. I would not recommend this, it totally sucked for the most part, and put 3 people in my school in emergency in less than a week, one of which was in a coma but recovered. Luckily I wasn't one of them. Jimson weed was going around my city. They were homegrown from some guy and I bought 2. I took one before the same week, but that's a completely different thing. But, since I took it before in that week, maybe that's why I tripped so hard. I took out all the seeds at my friend's house and ate all of them. There were lots of them. Stomach feels a little weird after. About 1 hour goes by and I'm completely delirious from here. I'm stuck at my friend's house and he's telling me to call my mom to get a ride home. I take the phone and tell him I already beat the game, leave me alone. Everything that happened from here I didn't even know until my friend told me the next day. That's how out of it I was. I don't remember any of it. At all. My friend's parents got home and he said he put me in his shower to hide me since he wasn't allowed to have anyone over and that I was making weird noises in the shower. He said I walked out of the shower to the main room of his house where the grandma was and sat on the couch. She gave me a piece of pizza and I took one bite out of it and put it in the VCR. Somehow, when I was messing with his phone, I did talk to my parents. So my mom was on the way, and he sent me outside to get picked up. And his driveway is really about a half-mile long. I walked down the whole driveway with my shoes off and my mom was at the bottom waiting for me. I walked all the way up again and got them and went back down. I was in the car with my mom and don't remember any of the ride at all. I do remember what happened once I got in my room though. People were yelling in the other room. Yeah, he's on drugs, just leave him alone till the morning. And all this stuff. My sister, the next day, said she was calling her friends to have them try to guess what I was on. I'm still in my room at this point and I don't have any idea if these were out-of-body experiences or crazy dreams. I was in my room but was actually outside smoking weed with my friend. That never really happened. I was in my room but was in my neighbor's room at the same time. Don't know anything really about my trip. It was so crazy and I wasn't really living it. I just woke up the next morning and went on with the day, pretty much. Very messed up. Won't ever take Jimson weed again. Didn't know it could be like that. I could have been close to death for all I know. It was about 2 summers ago and my brother wanted to go to a local park, which also has a massive garden with all kinds of plants. I was feeling pretty good and needed something to do anyway, so I took him to the park. We got there and I just sat there enjoying the day while he played on the playground equipment. I asked him if he wanted something to drink and he said yes, so I went over to the vending machine place and got us some sodas. Walking back to the playground I was looking at different plants along the way. I saw 2 small tree-ish plants with flowers hanging off of them. I thought to myself, damn, that looks like Datura. Upon closer inspection I found a tag on the tree and it was indeed 2 Datura plants in large pots just growing there beside the building. I had read about Datura several times and thought it would be nice to try a lotus. So I pulled off 2 leaves and headed back to the playground. When we were about to leave I ingested the leaves, on an empty stomach. Before we even got back home I felt a little different. About 30 minutes after I got home I knew it worked for sure. People say that they feel totally normal when on Datura or other deliriants, but I can definitely tell. It is extremely hard to explain, but the feeling is distinct for me. 2 things I got was cottonmouth and dizziness. It made me sort of drowsy, so I decided that I would lay down. After this I pretty much lost track of time and don't remember a whole lot, but I can explain the highlights. After laying there for not too long I started to drift in and out of consciousness. So I decided to get up and walk around to wake myself up, then laid back down and closed my eyes. This is where weird stuff started to happen. First I would just hear somebody talking to me and I would talk back for a while, not even thinking it odd that somebody was talking to me when I was all alone. Then I would open my eyes and nobody would be there. This happened a lot and it was sort of discouraging. I talked like this to people for what must have been 3 hours or so. I never once saw one, just talked, and when I went to look at them they were not there. One other incident that stands out in my mind was the phone was ringing. I told one of my friends who I currently thought I was talking to get it because I was kind of messed up. Then I opened my eyes and he wasn't there. By this time it rang about 5 times or so and I thought I better run and get it. But when I picked up the phone it was just a dial tone and the caller ID revealed nobody even called. Anyway, after that I decided it was time to go to sleep. There was one major after effect. My close-up vision was really blurry for about 3 or 4 days after the experience. I couldn't read or anything. Overall not a bad experience, but not a good one either. The constant auditory hallucinations were very annoying and discouraging to me. This was my first and last experience with Datura, but I don't regret using it at all. This is how it is, you become schizophrenic. How? Well, things manifest themselves that are not there in a state of perfect reality. I talked to my water heater for an hour because I heard my friend's voice coming from inside. He was stuck and trying to get out. It was 100% real, I at no point thought I was tripping. It was just reality. Then the what the hell I'm doing sets in and the hallucination passes. Then you answer the phone and have a nice long conversation, then you realize you're talking to a throw pillow and the what the hell am I doing sets in again. Your buddy comes in to talk to you about whatever, 30 minutes later you ask him if he wants something to drink, then looking in the fridge you get this weird feeling, what the hell am I doing? You turn around and your friend vanished. It sucks, you feel sick and out of control. Reality is the hallucination, or is the hallucination reality? What's real? You don't know. This goes on for hours and hours, I think on average about 14 to 18 hours. There are no fractals or patterns or pretty colors, for me. There is no sense of wow. It's more like what have I done to myself? Don't do it, I know if you are super curious you'll do it, but you have been warned. This is the ultimate psychosis, the dangers involved with this are unbelievable. With the 100% conviction that the hallucinations were reality, the dangers associated with hurting oneself or others are astronomical. You phase in and out of this state of altered reality with no noticeable transition. Running into traffic, setting the house on fire, or even the stereotypical jumping out of a window are all very, very possible with this stuff. If you are spiritual at all, understand that this plant is evil. There is nothing to be gained or learned from this plant aside from horror and self-doubt. It laughs at you and is very malicious in its intent. There is no taming or set and setting for this. You can show it all the respect in the world and in the end it reaps your essence in the form of your sanity and your vision. You will not see straight for days. I was uneducated when I first tried it and was convinced that I was permanently blinded by this plant. I could not read or focus in on anything for days. I agonized with this alone for days. I thanked God as everything came back into focus. Just another effect of her not wanting you to see reality as it is for as long as she can. Another mindfuck. Never again. If you really want to do it, read the reports. You'll see that they are all pretty messed up. I've done it 3 different times, so it wasn't just a bad trip. I was an experienced psychonaut and wanted to be sure about this plant and not give it a bad rap. All my friends agreed as well. This is better left alone or reserved for a hated enemy, at your own moral and legal risk. You've been warned.
What I am about to write about happened just yesterday. I am still hallucinating and my pupils are huge. This was my 3rd time tripping on Datura. I was with my boyfriend, D, and 4 other friends, J, L, Lee and C. J had done Datura with me and D before and hadn't liked it, so he didn't do it with us. We hadn't expected Lee to come, so we hadn't made enough tea for her. D had done Datura the other 2 times I had, and L and C never had. I myself was very excited to take Datura again. I had liked my other 2 experiences on it, and I had just come back from the rave where I had spent half the night unsuccessfully searching for LSD, and when I couldn't find it I couldn't even find a roll until the after party. I fell asleep at the after party and didn't roll. The last drug I had done was Datura a week ago, and a week before that, and before that, a very long while before that, it was probably pot. I was tired and disappointed. It was a crappy rave even if it didn't lack drugs, and ready for a high. Me and D picked 5 flowers from someone's front yard. They were white and pink. We boiled a tea for about 10 minutes. I was paranoid about my mom coming home, with 4 cups of water in it. We also put some real tea in it to hide the bitter taste. When it was done we poured almost all of it into an empty water bottle. The small amount left we just poured down the drink. Then me, D and J went to meet L and C. Lee was with them. I am a very impatient person, so I drank the first 1/4 of the tea. I may have had a little more than anyone else because the bottle was full to the cap, but I'm not sure. Then C drank some, then L and then D. After a few minutes or so I began to feel the familiar effects of Datura, slight cotton mouth, not as bad as usual, getting very tired, although I already was from staying up all night, and feeling heavy and weird. I also needed to go to the bathroom. I wanted to go to the Broadway market where they had a public bathroom, which everyone agreed to, but Lee, L and C wanted to go buy some candy at QFC first. I didn't have to go that bad, so I agreed. We all went to QFC and I remembered there was a bathroom there, but I couldn't remember where. I had been on Datura last time I went to it. Hey. Lee offered to show me where it was, but then, for some reason, I decided I didn't need to go to the bathroom anymore. C went off to buy a bus card and D, J, L, Lee and I got candy and waited in the line. A spasm kept shivering through my legs and feet and I was continually getting more and more fucked up. I decided I needed to sit down, so D and J took me to some chairs in the corner of the store. Soon Lee, L and C joined us. We stayed there for a little while, I can't remember why, maybe so Lee and L could eat their candy? And at some point I believe I did decide to go to the bathroom, and did. Then we left and were headed towards the Broadway market, but since I had already peed I didn't want to go anymore, plus I didn't feel like I could walk that far. I wanted to take a bus to a coffee shop downtown, but for some reason everyone else still wanted to go to the Broadway market, so I guess we went there. My legs began to twitch oddly. I wouldn't have called it twitching, it felt more like I was tripping on something that wasn't even there, but my boyfriend said that the whole right half of my body would suddenly twitch. After this I'm trying so hard to remember it, but right now I can't. I will tell you what my friends said happened. We went to the Broadway market and I was really fucked up. I would mumble things that nobody could understand, and apparently I started looking for a friend, V, who wasn't even there and never had been. I had left her at the rave, she wasn't even at the after party. J, sober, sat me and D, who was the second most fucked up out of all of us, at a table. Then I got up and walked into a store. J and D followed me. I supposedly looked terrified and I seemed to be looking for something or something. I walked to the back of the store and sat down. They got me to stand up and then I walked around the store sitting down randomly. I grabbed a little silver box and wouldn't let go for some time. Then I saw a friend of my mother's and her daughter. I remember this very vaguely. I saw her and tried to get away because I didn't want her to see me. I guess I knew I was really messed up, but then I went and stood on some carpets that were sitting on a box and sat on them, and this woman was right there. Apparently she saw me and lifted up my head. I gave her a blank stare and dropped my head. She asked D what I was on, etc., and then I guess she left. Once we left that store I went into Gap and sat in the middle of the store. They tried to get me out and I would just drop my head into my arms. My friends took me outside, thinking we should go to a nearby park. I could hardly walk. I followed V, who wasn't really there, into the street and sat down. Somehow they managed to get me down most of Broadway. It must have been pretty slow though, because I kept randomly sitting down. I can only guess this was because my feet were having spasms like they did in QFC. We never made it to the park. I turned on a street and began heading to the park, and then a police car and ambulance drove up. Nobody knows who called 911. The best guess is someone on the street saw how fucked up I was and decided I needed medical attention. I sat on the edge of the ambulance and another ambulance came. Why, I don't know, maybe it had different equipment or specialists in it. D tried to get to me but a cop pulled him away and he started crying. I think they got most of their information from J, who was retarded but otherwise sober. I was tied in a stretcher and put in the ambulance, where I was taken to the emergency room of Harborview Hospital. I think at some point I either passed out or fell asleep, because when my mom got to the hospital my eyes were closed. At some time I woke up, and I can very shiftily remember what happened. I was still hallucinating very badly. I didn't really know where I was, but my mom told me and then told me I had fallen unconscious, which I denied. I was tied down to the bed. My finger felt really weird, there was something on it, and I thought I had gloves on. I had been wearing gloves but I think they had been removed. I felt hot, so I kept trying to take my gloves off but I couldn't because of the restraints on my wrists. I don't remember this happening, but I asked to go to the bathroom. They took off the restraints and my mom walked me to the bathroom, but when we reached it I wouldn't go in, so I was taken back to the room. They brought a bedpan but I refused to use it. They were worried my bladder was going to explode or something, so they had to put a catheter in me. The nurse told me this repeatedly and I was like okay, but then when they started to take my pants off I started freaking out and trying to pull them back up. Eventually I had to be held down. The reason I think I was freaking out so bad was because I was hallucinating D, J and Lee standing next to the bed and it was very embarrassing. I also had tubes in my nose, though I don't remember this at all. And I had an IV, which I saw but I don't remember them putting the needle in my arm. At one point the doctor was explaining to my mother what was going on and I said to him, "Why are you talking to yourself?" I don't think I always acknowledged her presence. I thought D was there, and I talked to him a lot. At one point my mom left and G left with her and didn't come back when she did. I thought they wouldn't allow him back in. This was so vivid to me that I never knew that he hadn't actually been there until the time when I was going home and I asked my mom where he went and if he had ever been there. The doctor kept asking me things like what his name was, which I usually remembered but sometimes forgot. At one point I said Jay's name, but I don't know why. He also asked me what day it was and I said it was Wednesday the 17th, when in actuality it was Saturday the 2nd. I eventually realized it was Saturday but never stopped thinking it was the 17th. My mom said I talked to D and V and said something about striped socks. I also asked her, though I was probably hallucinating V or someone, if she was going to the after party. I was also getting very confused. I thought that an ambulance which had been called for someone at the rave had actually been called for me, and that I had taken half a green tea ecstasy pill with the Datura. Then I began to have memories from book I had recently read and I thought I had drunk alcohol and tried to kill myself, but I couldn't figure out why I had tried to kill myself. Eventually I came down enough to be allowed to go home. I wanted to go to the bathroom, the catheter was gone, and the doctor had to take the IV out of my skin. I thought it would hurt and I began shaking with fear. Then for some reason I thought he was going to inject morphine or heroin into me, and though that may have been fun, I didn't want a needle, so I asked the doctor if it was really necessary. His reply was taking the IV out? Yes, I can't let you go until it's gone, and then I remembered what he was doing. I went to the bathroom and then me and my mom were given a ride home from a neighbor. The doctor told my mom I could have died. My blood pressure kept rising and falling. I knew I was hallucinating, but I was still scared of big black bugs I kept seeing crawl and flit around the car. I got to my mom's house and tried to call D, but he wasn't home. I was still hallucinating a lot. I went to the bathroom and held a conversation with L and C for a while. My mom's pupils looked red and it was demonic and scary. This also happened to a baby picture of me which morphed into other things like a woman and a face. I am still hallucinating and getting fleeting weird feelings in my body. When I ate breakfast the roof of my mouth hurt a lot. My boyfriend said that happened to him too. Datura is not a good thing. I love not paying for drugs, but Datura is not worth it. And if you are over 18, you end up paying a lot more than an 8 of mushrooms or a few hits of LSD would cost. I admit I liked Datura before this happened. It was interesting to see people who weren't there, but there are better hallucinogens in the world. And they are a lot safer too. Even if you think you're experienced and knowledgeable, and you follow all the or whatever guidelines, Datura is unpredictable. Dying, or almost doing so, is not worth the high.